Welcome back to the Black Swamp Basketball Podcast presented by the Gerken Companies. Joined this week by an area legend, Ron Niekamp, many years at the University of Findlay, won a national championship there with my colleagues again, Dave Krauss, and good to have Tory Strock back with me. I am Lynn Groll. Looking forward to this one. Coach Krauss lined us up another phenomenal guest this week.
Well, it's really easy. I mean, hey, Coach, you want to come and talk basketball and some of your past history? And sure, I'll be there. And I said, okay, we might even feed you a piece of pizza and a wing, too. So Coach is very gracious to come, and it will be an enlightening conversation.
We can't drag our feet too much because Coach is not done coaching. He is coaching. He's an assistant these days, coaching his grandsons in the younger ages, and they have practice tonight, so we've got to keep things moving.
Yep, we'll get to our teams of the week here at the end of this show this week, and Coach Krauss and Tory will, I think they're going to have a pretty good discussion on our team of the week this week, which I'm looking forward to.
There'll be some bantering.
Yeah, I like that. We need that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm all for that. Yeah. I do. And Coach Niekamp, I'm just going to read you two short blurbs, two short summaries. I reached out to two former Oilers. One of them did not play for you. He played for Coach Howdeshell. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
Played for Coach Howdeshell. And the second one actually played for you. So the first one, the first one's a Hall of Famer that played for Coach Howdeshell. And I asked what stands out about Coach Ron Niekamp, and this Hall of Famer said his ability to make in-game adjustments to take advantage of the opponent's weaknesses. His teams always played harder and smarter than their opponents. He also had that aura of respect and fear that as a player you knew you had to bring it every day or someone else would play in front of you. He knew how to put a team together to cover all the bases so there were absolutely no weaknesses. That is from a Findlay Hall of Famer, and the second one is a gentleman that played for you, who also says he owes his environmental career to you, Coach Niekamp, for steering him in that direction. And this player says he was a defensive mastermind that got the most out of his players. The only reason I saw the court is because he rewarded players like me who would do the hard things, get defensive rebounds and take charges. He was as well respected in every aspect as any coach I've ever seen, and I truly enjoyed playing for him. His legacy continues on and off of the court. So, pretty high praise, Coach Niekamp, and from what I know about you, you're a pretty humble guy, but any thoughts or comments about?
Well, those are very kind words. I hope in some way I actually lived up to those kind words. Thinking back and looking back at all the success you've had, whether you coached anything, is the trophies, the championships, and all those sorts of things. But the reality is, it's the relationships, the people that leave the program, go on and do things with their life that really are inspiring, to say the least. I mean, these are successful people and done wonderful things. I have two people who went on to become physicians. Someone's on Wall Street, someone's a coach, someone's a superintendent. So, it is the greatest reward of coaching is when a player comes back and says, thank you.
Coach, I know we can't get into each of those points they made. The one that stood out was the first one where the gentleman said that you did a fantastic job of constructing your teams to cover all your bases. Talk about that a little bit and maybe how you went about recruiting to make sure you had all your bases covered, and how'd you know what you needed each year?
We had several phases of teams at the university, especially I was a high school coach for 13 years before that, and I think at different times we had different kinds of teams, but let me go back a little bit and talk about my background as a player, and maybe that's what defined me as a coach. It was the coaches I had. I played for a great coach at St. Henry High School, Fran Gilbel, who won a gazillion games and, I don't know, 3 state championships, and had a very successful career. And he did things a certain way. And then I went on to college and played 4 years at Miami of Ohio. Was not a great player. I was a role player most of my career. Sometimes I played a little bit, sometimes I played a little more, but it was a tremendous experience. But I played for a guy who came from Army, who had been coaching at Army, and he had an assistant at Army.
Story, Coach Krauss. What a great message for young players that think they're above criticism.
I've shared that story, his workout story, for years and years and years, and challenged people to do what, and I have not seen anybody accept that challenge.
Sure. So, Coach, I want to rewind. Parkway High School, Ottawa-Glandorf High School, Lima Senior, and then 26 years, boom, at the University of Findlay. Each step of the way, how did you know it was time to move on to the next opportunity? And then all of a sudden, bam, how did you know Findlay was going to be home at that point?
You know, it's some interesting things. You mentioned Parkway. I took the head coaching job at Parkway right out of college. I'd never been an assistant coach, and I don't really know why I did that. I mean, my coaches got me an interview at Dayton Wayne High School, who was coached by Adelphia St. John's graduate at that time, and I could have gone there and started teaching and become an assistant coach. And Parkway wasn't exactly the place where you would think that, you know, it turned out to be a great place for me because, but why I made that decision, I look back on it and I say, man, that was a pretty big gamble.
Well, you know, I did some research on that team, Coach. There's not too many teams your first year of coaching that have a D1 player. That kid that went to Citadel,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, Morrison, Greg Morrison.
Yeah.
So I did have a couple guards that were juniors my first year, and you know, and then we had some guys that were bigger guys that weren't very polished, but boy, when you have guards, you have a chance. That's what I always say about basketball. You get to the NCAA tournament, and you have guards, you have a chance. And we had some guards. And then, this is an interesting story. I'm at the golf course after my second year at Parkway High School, and I see an old teammate of mine, John Bruns, who I played with at St. Henry. He was a year older than me, and he was teaching at this place, and I don't think I even ever heard of the school. It was called Ottawa-Glandorf, and he said, you know, Ron, he said, they've been really, really down and bad. He says, but I think there's some potential there. I think there's some potential there. And so I went and interviewed. I was 24 years old, and I got the head coaching job at Ottawa-Glandorf in the Western Buckeye League. And, you know, we struggled for a couple years. We maybe around 500. We weren't. And then it's just like, we had some kids that could really play, and it just took off.
2 Final Fours, 77 and 78, right?
Yeah, 2 Final Fours. So, and then you asked the question, when is it time to leave? I don't know. I look back on that decision to leave because I thought, I don't know how long I'm going to be in coaching, and I just wanted the experience of what is it like playing in maybe one of the biggest leagues in the state of Ohio, and so I didn't, and I don't know that I had anything in my mind that I would say was a goal for me. I just thought, you know, I'll try it, and I got the job at Lima Senior and coached there for 6 years, and it was a phenomenal experience, to be honest with you. It wasn't an easy experience, but it was really, really, I learned more about coaching outside of the gym than maybe any place I had been, because different kinds of kids with different makeups and different problems. So that was a great experience. And then one of my assistants, Jim Penn, at Lima Senior, was a Findlay grad, and he showed me a letter one day in a locker room. He said, I got this letter that Jim Hottishell is retiring from Findlay. And again, I had Kenny Pottist had played for me at OG and had played at Findlay, so I was familiar with that program somewhat. But I had been a high school coach for 13 years, and I thought, I'd been at Lima Senior for 6 years. I thought, this would be a nice change. This would be an adjustment. My kids were still fairly small. It's easy to move when your kids are, pre-kindergarten and things like that. So we made the move, and I actually thought, I said, that's a place I think I can coach for a long time. I didn't know how long I could handle the rigors of coaching. It's extremely demanding. And some of you that have been involved in coaching behind the scenes, there's a lot of things going on that make it very difficult. And I thought, what? I think I can coach for a long time at Findlay, and it turned out I was able to go 26 years. So I think it was the right decision. I still look back and say, man, what if I'd stayed at OG or Ottawa-Glandorf? I don't know. I don't know. Dave Sweet did awfully well there. But so yeah, I was a head coach for 39 years, which is crazy. It's.
And never assistant till now.
Yeah, now I'm an assistant. Yeah, and I'm learning every day in coaching young kids. It's a completely different thing. The attention span is about 15 seconds in some cases. So, but it does. I do enjoy coaching young kids, especially when I have a grandson on the game, and one of my grandsons is playing out at Colorado School of Mines in Golden, Colorado, Division II school. It's an engineering school, which he is going into engineering. So it's rewarding to see them. For any coach, they will tell you one of the most enjoyable things about coaching is seeing your players get better and better and better and be able to handle this difficult game. And basketball, it's like golf. It's really hard. It's a hard game to play. These kids who are good make it look easy, but you try to play sometime, just like you try to play golf sometimes, you realize it's a very difficult game to play. And you have kids, and what you do is you teach them how to play that game and make it look easy. And the pride that they feel when they can accomplish that, be a part of a successful program, a successful team, man, that's a good feeling. That is, and they never forget it.
Coach, I want one more thing, and then I'm gonna zip it and let these guys take the reins. But something that I think the coaches and young coaches watching this would appreciate. You were at Findlay 26 years. Your record speaks for itself. Unbelievable. You must have had other opportunities to leave Findlay, but you stayed. So clearly you weren't chasing money, you weren't chasing status and fame. Why Findlay for 26 years?
Yeah, I've been asked that question a lot, and I did have some opportunities, but I never really pursued. I didn't make that one of my life's goals to be a Division I head coach. I'd played Division I. I understood what Division I was about. I just felt this was the right place for me. I could coach for a long time. You don't see many Division I coaches last more than a handful of years. To coach 26 years, so and I never look back on any decisions I made to maybe not pursue opportunities. If someone called and said, "We'd like to interview you," I didn't want to go somewhere and be hired by an athletic director and then maybe 3 years later have that athletic director leave and me work for somebody that didn't hire me. It's not, so it wasn't anything that I really pursued.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Let me take a break here and we'll come back and get to more questions.
High school seniors, uncertain that college is right for you? Concerned about the cost of higher education? At the Gerken Companies, we offer rewarding livelihoods even without a degree. That's a good living straight out of high school with no tuition debt. Starting pay between recent college grads and those with high school diplomas is closer than you might think. So if you enjoy enjoy teamwork, working outdoors, and being part of something meaningful, consider your options at gerkencompanies.com/careers.
American Freedom Energy and Grandma's General Store off Route 24 on State Route 109, just south of Liberty Center, now has 88 unleaded shop for fuel, food, drinks, and much, much more, including locally raised meats and home-baked goods. American Freedom Energy and Grandma's General Store is proud to support Black Swamp Football and is the host of the Black Swamp Football podcast, football show, and Saturday mornings Rise and Rewind. Stop in and see Glenn and Greg today and make American Freedom Energy and Grandma's General Store a part of your everyday routine. The Swanton Welding Company proudly supports our local student athletes and coaches. We're committed to being your local steel fabrication company in Northwest Ohio and building projects across the country. For job opportunities at the Swanton Welding Company, visit www.swantonweld.com or visit them at 407 Zider Way in Swanton. Welcome back to the Black Swamp Basketball Podcast presented by the Gerken Companies. Thank you very much to the Gerken Companies. Also our hosts here at American Freedom Energy, Glenn and Greg Badenhop. Can't thank them enough for their support and their hospitality over the years. Joined by former Findlay coach, Parkway coach, Ottawa-Glandorf, and Lima Senior coach Ron Niekamp. Thanks so much, Coach, for making the trip up here. I know he's got to practice to get here, so we won't keep him too much longer, but we do have some more questions for him. You were talking about something last week that I want you two to get some dialogue on. You were talking about high school, you can't really play a zone defense and change things up, and at the college level with the shot clock, you can go to a zone, and then if the ball goes in the corner, you can go to a man or vice versa. Take me through that a little bit, and the differences. You got to coach at the college level, Coach Krauss.
At what point in your tenure at Findlay, was the shot clock there from the get-go?
I think it started early in the three-point line started my first year in like 85, and then I think the shot clock came just a year or two after that. Right. But it was a 35-second shot clock at that time, and it wasn't that big of a deal, but that 5 seconds reduction makes a big difference. Right. It's changed the game. Teams are playing different styles, I think, obviously in college because of the shot clock. People ask me all the time if I think high school should adopt the shot clock, and I know there's problems with that, but I wish they would. I mean, I thought it was fun. I mean, you have to adjust and maybe coach some things differently, but ultimately it's probably makes you want to play more players and have to do different kinds of things, but I'd like to see a shot clock.
No, I always felt that at Findlay, it was the advantage of a shot clock was defensively. The fact that you could just play. You want to play a zone? Okay, you only have to play it for 25 seconds, basically. Once you get the ball, get up court, so you can do anything for 25 seconds. So, but I always think that's something. I agree with you wholeheartedly, Coach. That high schools should be adopting it. I think it's coming. It's just a matter of when, but. Yeah. What about, as you talked about your OG years, your Lima Senior years, you have some special players now. You had talked earlier, there wasn't any D1 basketball level player, but you coached some people that had some notoriety, and give us a couple stories that you remember from those years.
Well, I always go back to the tremendous game we had at Lima Senior with Middletown, and Chris Carter was playing for Middletown, and we had William White. Both of these became NFL legends, tremendous NFL careers, but the rivalry between Middletown and Lima Senior back in those days, when I moved to Lima, all they wanted to talk about was when Jerry Lucas came to town and how Lima Senior held Jerry Lucas to his all-time low in scoring at Lima Senior. What they didn't want to say is what happened when Lima Senior went back down to Middletown. He scored like 69 on the Lima Senior Spartans. So anyway, you get an idea that the old-timers loved the stories about those rivalries between Paul Walker and his regime. So anyway, we had a great team. our best player had broken his arm a couple weeks before that, but we were state ranked in the top 10. Middletown, Chris Carter was a phenomenal player. Earl Bruce was at the scorer's table, and he didn't want to be partial to either side because he wanted to sign both of these kids. So he sat at half court, and we ended up Andre Reed, who is a phenomenal player, phenomenal high school player at Lima Senior, hit a jump shot at the buzzer to win that game, and that place was wall-to-wall packed, and have a phenomenal memory and background about the old days of back in the days when Lima was playing in the GMC and competing with the Hamiltons and Middletowns and Fairfields and Lakotas, Cincinnati, Princeton, tremendous conference.
You even had some Division I football players in your OG days, too.
Yeah, well, Brian Dickey. Brian Dickey was quarterback at Michigan, and Jerry Burguy, who I think is a dentist now in Delphus. Jerry played at Michigan. In fact, I'll tell you the story. Brian Dickey played on the first OG team to go to the state tournament. This is 77, I believe. And of course, there were only 3 divisions at that time. And, going to the state at that time was a really, really big deal. And I'm sure it is today, but maybe more so back in those days. There's more divisions now. But Brian went on to have a really good career at Michigan. And a couple years later, he came in and visited the school, whose name was Bob Knight. And he came over to Miami. Bob Knight took the head coaching job at Army. And this guy was a different kind of coach. And if you coach at the academies, you can do about what you want with cadets. It's not like a normal situation. So I had a completely different experience with my college coach, who coached there for 2 years. Tough-minded guy.
That was
Tate's Locke.
Yeah, that was Tate's.
Tate's Locke went on to coach in the NBA. Tate's left for Clemson, and then Darrell Hedrick became the coach at Miami, and Darrell had a really good career. He's one of the only coaches that I know of that beat Dean Smith at the Dean Dome and beat Bobby Knight at Indiana. So that's a phenomenal record that he holds. He's still alive, by the way. That sort of gave me a background in different kinds of coaching high school kids, playing in college. And I think your question about how I developed some of the things, certainly the idea or understanding that a coach could probably have a greater impact on the defensive side of the ball right away than he could on the offensive side. And I think the offensive side will come along, but it takes a lot longer. It's just not as, and today with athletes, and what you see in basketball, these kids are so much better athletically, bigger, faster, stronger. They have a greater impact on the defensive side as opposed to the offensive side. And so anyway, from a recruiting standpoint, we looked at kids who obviously could score, were adept at that part of the game, but we did always look for kids who we thought could play defense. That would give us an advantage if we could put kids on the floor that could defend, and that was ingrained in me from my college coaches who were. And at that time, Tate's was kind of on the front end of a wave of how defense would be changed, and help side defense and denial defense and how you guard screens and all those kinds of things. It was really new. So I think some of those things helped me when I first began coaching, whether it was a high school coach or at the University of Findlay, to understand that you could make a really quick impact on the defensive side and then allow your players time to grow and develop and to kind of merge on the offensive side. So that's how we approach recruiting. We looked for kids who obviously were capable offensive players, but we wanted kids who could defend as well, and we recruited kids who could play at both ends.
Did you ever get a chance to meet Coach Knight?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, in Columbus not that long ago, I not that long ago, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, he spoke at the Hall of Fame, Ohio Basketball Hall of Fame, and had a chance to chat with him, so.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
You talked about good defensive players. What makes a good defensive player from a coaching perspective?
Well, I think a lot of it, certainly you want to have a certain amount of athleticism because you have the physical capabilities, but also it's a mindset. And we found a lot of times that high school players, and Dave will verify this, if you're a high school coach and your best player, you really don't want them to get in foul trouble. You don't want them to guard the best player because that's a problem. You can't be successful with him sitting on the bench. So
In the second half, you can put them on somebody.
yeah. So a lot of those kids weren't great defensive players, but we found that kids from certain programs would flourish in college. Kids who had coaches who also put that emphasis on their players, and you didn't have to start from scratch when you got them in college. So,
Coach, that was going to be one of my follow-up questions. If you knew you needed a couple of dogs, just a couple of stoppers on defense, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but give me a couple of high school programs where you say to your coaches, hey, I know they have some kids that'll play defense. Were there a couple schools where you knew you could find some kids?
yeah, certainly. We got a lot of kids from Putnam County. It was always a strong area for us to recruit. We had some outstanding kids from Putnam County. Anywhere, really, we recruited kids from Northwest Ohio primarily, and then we would go to Cincinnati, Columbus, Cleveland, Toledo, and look for kids. But, man, there were always good, solid kids in Northwest Ohio that we could count on that were going to be there for 4 years, that were going to accept coaching, were going to accept their role, and would get better and better and better. So that was sort of the nucleus of our program at Findlay. And then we went and looked for kids that maybe a little more athletic, a little more pizzazz to their ability and ceiling, and that made for a great combination.
One of the quotes that Tory read a little bit ago was your end game adjustments, your national championship season of 09. 3 of your last 4 games went into overtime. Were there some end game things that happened in those games that went in?
I'll tell you what, that was crazy because, and Dave was with us at that time. I would say my coaching style was not, I was not someone that would over-strategize any game. I think we prepared our kids in practice, and they learned what their limits were, what they could and couldn't do, who should be the guy to take the shot at this time, so maybe strategy was not as important as getting the players to understand exactly what the pecking order on the team was, who could do what, who was capable of doing this, what was my role, and who was going to take tough shots late in the game. So strategy, maybe, our strategy in the championship game wasn't too successful because we couldn't score the entire second half.
What are you talking about, 12 points and a half and you still win the game? That's pretty good coaching.
It is, yeah, if you take credit for that. But in-game adjustments, I think we always tried to do things that our players were familiar with and that we had rehearsed, that were part of our routine. We didn't want to get outside of our routine. Our players knew what we would do in certain situations. We weren't going to deviate. We weren't going to draw up something on the board that we've never done before. So, and rely on that. And part of it too is you develop players that don't require them to be in special situations all the time. You require kids who, as Knight would say, you read the defense. He does this, you do that. He does that, you do this. That's how players really develop and get better. It's not go from point A to point B to point C. It's not very successful. Instead of running plays, your players learn how to make plays. So that was kind of how we coached, especially at the offensive end. Players learn to make plays, who was capable of doing what, stick with what you can do, and as your team develops and gels, then they can handle any situation.
Did you guys have a feeling that 08-09 team was going to do what it was going to do? 36-0. You almost beat Xavier in an exhibition game, too, and they went to the Sweet 16 that year.
Yeah. Well, we had a veteran team. We had beaten Ohio State in the exhibition game the year before. We'd played Dayton and had Dayton beat at Dayton Arena the week before we played Ohio State when these guys were juniors. When the start of that year, I was in Atlanta watching my daughter play volleyball at Georgia Tech, and our SID called me and said, you guys are ranked number 1 in the preseason poll. It's like, it's not really something you want to hear. A month before the season starts, your team's ranked number 1. This player is going to be the National Player of the Year. It's like, where do you go from there? There's only one way you go, right? Down.
Yeah.
So, we were, the year before, we had gotten beat. We lost 5 games. 3 of them were to Grand Valley. Grand Valley had a phenomenal center. Callistus Ezekwu was 6'11". They had a great team. They made it to the Elite 8, and they ended up, I thought they would win it all. They ended up getting beat the first round of the Elite 8. So the next year, we were loaded. We had experienced players at every position. And but it creates a problem when you start here. Yeah, you think Ohio State knows about that? They're just mentally, and how do you? And maybe it might have helped us if we had gotten knocked off early and because then you reassess yourself and what are we doing well? What do we have to change? We never experienced that, and in some ways, I think maybe as we got late in the season in the tournament, we didn't play great. We just played well enough to win, and we were talented, and we just played well enough to win, and luckily the ball bounced our way.
What was the makeup of that team that made it so special? Why were they so good? You can jump in here too, Coach Krauss, if you have some thoughts.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave. You have a perspective on that.
Well, I do, because that was my first year in the program. I kind of weaseled my way in, and Coach said, come on over. Just don't mess us up. I said, don't worry about that. And I remember our very first practice. We're 2-hour practice. We go up to the coach's office. We're talking about this and we're talking about that, and I finally get brave enough to say, well, fellas, I will say this. In this 2-hour practices, I saw more dunks in 2 hours than I saw in my entire career where I coached. So these kids were unbelievable athletes. I mean, like you talked about the Player of the Year, Josh Bostic. He was the guy. He was the nuts of that team. He was the glue. But then you had a point guard that was as good as they come. Marcus Parker out of Canton McKinley, tough. Not really big physical kid, but boy, he quick. He could make the plays, make a shot. And then they had a wing guy, Morgan Lewis, who just jumped out of this old gym and the next gym. And the big guy in the middle, Lee Roberts, was just a solid defender. And then after that, it was just a bunch of other guys. Nate Hyde, Tyler Evans, just guys that were just solid, good people.
Yeah. I think that team lent itself to being really good defensively, and we didn't have anyone run away from us. We didn't have anybody come out and just get us down 10 or 15 points. Even if we were not playing well offensively, we were right there because we were so good and so athletic defensively. And our players, when your best player, who is Josh Bostic, comes to practice every day and wants to kick your ass if you're guarding him, you've got something going, because that sets the tone for everyone else. And he didn't take a day off. He didn't let up on anybody. He had that mentality that I'm going to guard you, and you're not going to score, and then you can't guard me. And that's...
There was a time earlier, we played an early December game, and it was one of those games Coach was talking about. We didn't play all that well, and Coach wasn't really in-your-face kind of guy, but after that game, he pretty much went around the locker room and just gave everybody some encouraging words. And he got to Josh Bostic, and he looked at Josh and said, "Look, buddy boy, I think you've been reading your press clippings too much." He goes, "And that's not helping your cause any." And just right then and there, a kid like that, you don't know how he's going to receive that. But just talking about what Coach just said, he received it this way. He saw me later and says, "Coach, what are you doing tomorrow at 2:30? "I'll be here." "Well, meet me on the court." He comes out in a 10-pound vest. And for a half hour, all I had to do was pass the ball. He had a workout he was going to do. And he was sweating. He was just sweating like crazy. Goes in, changes clothes, come back for a 3:30 practice, and goes through that. He did that weekly for the rest of the year. Now, you tell me, that's why you're not the best player in the country, because he's putting time in. And he took criticism and made the most of it. And today he's a player development guy with Rockets after a long career professionally and overseas.
Travels with them. And so when your best player can accept criticism, when he's a senior and he's All-American, preseason All-American, and he can accept being challenged and criticized, man, that sets a tone for everybody. Leadership is so important, but leadership in the locker room, I've had some tremendous leaders. Tyson McLaughlin, the coach at Ottawa-Glandorf right now, was a phenomenal leader. He played on a great team. I think they were 30-4 when he was a senior. I'm not surprised. He's such an outstanding coach. I mean, he was really, really good in the locker room. And that's, I think in any game, but in basketball, it's so important that you have coaches. I think you want to establish leadership, but more what you want to establish is trust, fostering trust. And, for young coaches, I would tell them, trust is a function of competence and integrity. And when you have competence, you know the game, you know what you want to do, and you have, from a coaching standpoint, I think integrity would be you're fair. Your players know that you're fair. They may not always agree with you, but if they recognize that you are consistently fair, they will accept maybe a role that they wouldn't like, or maybe you move up a sophomore and ahead of a junior. They'll accept it if they feel like you're fair. So I think fostering trust is one of the key elements for young coaches, and you earn that over time. It just does. You don't get that just because you're named the head coach. You have to earn that. So,
Coach, I want to rewind just a little bit. The Findlay stuff, the Josh Bostic.
And I was in my office behind my desk, and he came in and he put his hands down on my desk, looking at me, and he had a Rose Bowl ring on his left hand, and he had a Rose Bowl ring on his right hand. And I looked at that and I said, "Wow!" And he said, "Coach, I never had more fun or a greater thrill in all my life when we went to the state tournament." So I thought that was really kind of a neat statement to make by a young kid. It gives you some idea of what it means to them to be a part of something special.
Yeah, that whole Final Four experience, and that's the one thing, Coach, with the new 7 divisions that we got thrown in.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate. But
well, we have memories of old St. John's Arena and the atmosphere there, and it was a great past. But I don't know how that'll affect things. I suppose it'll work its way out, and it's for the best, I suppose. But guys of our age, we look back on some really golden days of high school basketball.
Absolutely. Speaking of some golden days, you coached against some Hall of Famers too. I mean, you go back to your WBL days. Some guy named Bob Arnzen. Got any Bob Arnzen stories, Coach?
Well, we played Delphus, and we couldn't beat Delphus, and Delphus had just beat up on the Titans for year after year, and he was so respected. I tell people this about when they ask me about people who had really great influences on how I coached, and I always went back and I mentioned Bob Arnson's name, because Bob, he coached differently than most people coached, and and he dealt with officials differently. Bob didn't get up and he wasn't on officials, he wasn't trying to get calls, he wasn't harassing officials. And they would come over to him and run over to him and listen to what he had to say. I'm thinking, now wait a second. He's got something going there. And he had officials eating out of his hand. I said, this guy's got it. And I learned that, you know what? There's a way of dealing with officials. They're human. And I learned a lot from his demeanor with officials and his demeanor with his players. I thought was really, really good, and I tried to mimic that when I became as I became a coach. And he was one of the people I always looked at as really, really a great influence on all coaches.
Well, that's interesting to know where that trait came from, because I'd go watch your Findlay teams, and then fortunately was able to sit on the bench with you, and we were all kind of raised in the Bob Knight, the Al McGuire, hey, you got to work the ref thing, that was kind of ingrained in coaches during that time. But your coach, now I know the secret. He had Bob Arnson to follow, and that was him. He never, and he had the same thing. I remember going to Grand Valley, and we're playing in a hot, heavy contest, and coach wants a timeout, and the guy gives him a timeout. Oops, Grand Valley had the ball right in front of me. But they gave us a timeout.
We got a timeout when they had the ball.
That's total respect right there.
Wow.
The official was completely flummoxed by that one.
Coach, a good friend of mine, you talked about Putnam County, and he popped into my head. Randy Siefker was a great player for you at Findlay. What do you remember about Randy? Because he'll probably listen to this.
I think he still is in our record books for three-point shooting, and maybe it's the most 3 points in a game, but Randy was a machine, offensively especially. And of course, I always tease him, he came to us from the banks of the Big Ditch in Miller City, Ohio. I've been there. I've been to McEnreda's. I knew the landscape. And he had a wonderful career, and I still see him. He comes to games now and again, and really, really fun. In Miller City, it's a hotbed of basketball, man. They love their basketball in Miller City.
Yeah. Coach, what did it mean to have Niekamp Arena named after you in Croy Physical Education Center? Niekamp Arena, that's a hell of an honor.
Yeah. I have to say I was shocked by that. I'll say this. I grew up in a family of 9 boys, and our dad put a basketball court, cement court in the backyard when we were young, and for 17 years consecutively, there was a Niekamp on one of the high school basketball teams at St. Henry. It's incredible. So it was special. Basketball didn't have football when I was in high school. I wish they did, but didn't have the sport until later. But anyway, I have now nieces and nephews and grandkids who come to the gym and look at that, and it's a really good feeling, I have to say.
If is there a reason why it kind of got into your dad's blood and all of you, Coach?
The only thing I can say is that at St. Henry and Fort Recovery back in the 60s, Salina ICHS, basketball, it's hard to describe what it meant to those little towns. The gyms weren't very big, and it was just unbelievable. People had nothing else to do in the wintertime except go to basketball games, and it became incredible. Fort Recovery, my junior year, beat us. Tom Bryan went on to play at Nebraska. Kerry Myers beat us when he was a sophomore. Kerry Myers went on to play at Tennessee. Wow. I played against 9 Division I players when I was a high school player down in St. Henry. So that's amazing, isn't it?
Wow.
Coach, those early 90s St. Henry teams with Bobby Hoying and Glass and those guys, I was looking at some of that today because those teams still get talked about a lot, you know. And I saw on the 90-91 team, those great teams, Kevin and Terry Niekamp.
Yeah.
How are they tied to you?
Nephews, both nephews.
Both nephews.
Redman actually went on to play football at Ohio State,
Yeah.
but tore his knee up and only played 2 years. And Terry played for me at Findlay.
Okay.
So yeah, those are my older brother's sons, and Bobby Hoying. They had I don't know, 2 state championships in football and maybe 2 in basketball. So.
Well, looking at the one team picture, Jeff Harding sitting there in the front row, he'd hurt you. I mean, he was a beefcake, man.
Yeah, there are people listening right now that don't understand what St. Henry.
No.
Jeff Hardings was on the basketball team, and he wasn't a starter. He came off the bench, and the OSU football coach at that time, of course, Bobby Hoying, was being recruited heavily by Ohio State, and I don't recall the name of the football coach at Ohio State at that time. Maybe you can, who would that have been?
John Cooper, probably?
John Cooper was sitting behind the team bench, and my brother was sitting next to him, and Hardings was going to be put in the game, so he got off the bench and took his warm-up jersey, and John Cooper said, "Who in the hell is that?" Of course, Hardings went on to have a great career at Penn State and then with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, good story.
Why is the MAC in that area so impressive? And it's not just one sport. They have multiple state championships and everything. Why is it? Put it in perspective for us.
That's a question everyone asks, and the only thing I can say is some guesses. One of the things, it's in those towns there are not movie theaters and malls, and kids still play a lot of stuff outside when they're young, whether it's football or basketball or baseball, as we did when we were kids. I think the other thing is maybe an attitude where the coaches get to coach the kids, and you know what? Parents, stay out of it. You respect the coaches, respect the coach's authority, let them coach those kids hard. And that's what I would say. And if you, one of my former players is a superintendent down at Marion Local, Mike Pullman, had a great career at Findlay, and I think he would tell you the same thing. I mean, I think you have to let parents be parents, and let coaches be coaches, and let players be players.
Wish a lot of people would take that advice.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Just being honest.
Yeah, it's great advice.
Yeah.
You want to ask your question about the gyms and?
I mean, that's asking a lot.
He's going to have some good ones.
I will ask this. This is the last thing, because we do have some pizza and wings coming for Scott Army's going to deliver some stuff. We wanted to feed Coach Niekamp for making the trip. Coach, the last thing I have, what did it mean to you to get inducted into the Cradle of Coaches at Miami? I mean, that's a renowned fraternity. Cradle of Coaches at Miami. You're in it.
Yeah, I still can hardly believe that I'm in that. It's phenomenal. When I was a player at Miami, I sprained my ankle my freshman year, and the coach made me tape my ankle before every practice. And there was an old trainer there that knew Woody, Era, Bo, the long list of people that came through there, and he would always talk and tell stories of those guys, and it was really a special feeling for me, 19 years old, to hear from this guy, and he knew Weeview Bank, and was friends with all these guys. When they came back, they all came back to see the trainer. So, yeah, to be mentioned and be a part of that is unbelievable. I never imagined that would happen to me, but it did.
I'll ask it. We have a little bit of time here, but gyms that you played in that were maybe your favorite, it didn't have to be St. Henry, it could have been an opposing gym, or coached in as your coaching career. But there's some arenas that you're just like, I just love being in that environment.
I have the greatest memories from that old Bowling Green gym, because we always went through the tournament there. And one of the things I was looking back, after my second year at Ottawa-Glandorf, we hadn't been very good, and I thought, man, are we ever gonna make it to like win the district and maybe get to be the regional? And I think like 5 of my last 9 years as a high school coach, we were in the regional finals, and they were usually held at Bowling Green Anderson Arena, and that place was loud. I mean, when it got down to crunch time, it was an electric place to play. So I have to mention playing at OG at home, man, our opponents, they didn't have a chance.
They still don't.
When we finally beat Bob Arnson at home, introducing our players, introducing the Blue Jays, one of our students had hidden a chicken in his jacket that was painted blue, and he threw it out on the floor when they introduced the Dolphins.
Wow.
And Bob was so gracious. He laughed a little, and but so obviously playing there, the old Lima Senior gym, yeah, we had some tremendous games, just phenomenal athletes, packed houses. And one of the common things of the place is the seats all around the floor. I really, if you have seating on the ends like the old Anderson Arena, Lima Senior's old gym, OGs, I mean, that's a big advantage. So,
were there some arenas, and maybe that you even coached in, that were just really hard to win in? Take me through some of those.
Well, yeah, I mean, the times that we played, I think the toughest places to play in our conference were the teams in the Upper Peninsula, the Yoopers. Michigan Tech, it was a 13-hour bus ride, and they were good and well-coached. Northern Michigan, Lake Superior State. Boy, in those days when we first got into the GLIAC, those teams were really good. And trying to go there, and we'd have guys and girls, both teams, on a bus. So if you stopped to get something to eat, it'd take like an hour and a half or 2 hours. I mean, it just was an incredible to try to, and then compete the next day in a game. So, and Houghton, Michigan is like 3 hours north of Green Bay, Wisconsin. I mean, this weather is unbelievable. They have more snow there from lake effect snow than almost any place in the country. So that's a unique experience. But
I always told people when they asked about that trip, and I was unfortunate to have to be on that bus a few times, well, how long is that? And I go, it's 2.5. And they go, hours? I go, no, 2.5 movies from Michigan Tech to the bridge.
Bridge.
Yeah. You get to the bridge and you got 5 hours to go. So.
And you're probably always driving through snow at some point on the journey.
And it doesn't melt up there.
No.
It doesn't go anywhere. It just piles it up.
Wow.
Coach, I want to I've never asked you this, but go back to 2009 and that last game. When that shot by Tyler went in, just tell me what was going through you then.
I was mostly relieved. I was relieved because I felt we hadn't prepared very well for that team, and it showed in the second half. We hadn't played a zone all year, and they played a great matchup zone, and we just couldn't seem to do anything against it. and obviously we didn't shoot the ball very well. But so, yeah, for me, it was like, when you get to a certain age, you realize you don't get there very often, and you better take advantage of it when you do. And I was just relieved that like I said, we did a poor job coaching. We had a couple of our best players had really bad games. Tyler Evans bailed us all out by making a 3 at the buzzer to win that game. So
it's an unbelievable shot, though. If you've seen it at all, it needs to be Googled and looked at, because it's it's an unbelievable shot.
I watched a lot of that stuff today.
Did you?
I watched a lot of that stuff today.
Well, interestingly enough, some of the most difficult things, you play 3 games in 4 days. So we played Wednesday night, the 8 o'clock game, played the 6 o'clock game on Thursday night. Friday, they had us doing, CBS had us doing interviews with all the players, coaches. We had to go to an all-star game that night. We had to try to work a practice in, and we're going to play a team that plays a kind of defense that we had not seen ever, really. It was a 3-2 matchup zone, and we really struggled with that. So I look back at the whole situation saying, man, I would have never forgiven myself if we would have lost that game.
Well, that team was pretty darn good, because they come back the next year and they won it.
They won it.
Yeah.
Cal Poly,
Cal Poly Pomona,
Let's, the pizza and wings have been delivered. Coach has to get back to Findlay for practice.
Gonna turn him loose.
I think he needs to go eat, and we'll do our team of the week.
Yep, we can do that. Yep.
Coach
Niekamp, thank you so much.
It's been fun,
really
guys.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, and you've just been unbelievable and so gracious and so humble, and so many people look up to you, former players, players you don't even know in the area, just admire you, so thank you.
Appreciate it, guys. You got a great thing going here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take a break here from the Gerken Companies, come back and hand out our Team of the Week from a week ago.
Hard-working individuals have been the heart of the Gerken Companies for generations. Together, we construct the highways and infrastructure that strengthen our communities. Gerken is seeking rock-solid performers. We offer generous benefits, continuous training, top-notch equipment, and a culture that rewards effort. Want to be part of something big, steady, and stable with room to grow? Whether you're experienced or just starting your career, we encourage you to apply at gerkencompanies.com/careers.
Welcome back to the Black Swamp Basketball Podcast presented by the Gerken Companies. Thank you to Mandy and the crew at the Gerken Companies for the support here during basketball season. Going to hand out our Teams of the Week from a week ago, girls side and boys side, and talking pre-show, this is going to be interesting. I want to see where you two are going to go with this, because there was a pretty heated argument about who was going to take home these awards.
And I want to preface this. Coach Krauss is the basketball authority.
Yes, he is.
And so I don't want to step on toes, but I've got 7 words for you when we're talking about girls and boys teams of the week this week. 7 words. On to victory, red, white, and blue. The Patrick Henry Patriot boys, the Patrick Henry Patriot girls, unbelievable what they've done to date, and I'm not budging on that, but I will hear his side of things.
Well, I like the fact that you know those first 7 words. That's impressive.
Coach, I can sing it all.
Why you didn't sing it, I was a little bit disappointed there.
We both know why I didn't sing it, but I know the words.
Okay, well, you'd be the only one in this town who would know those words.
No, that's true.
he may get his Liberty Center status revoked.
You
better be careful here.
You can't come to breakfast or coffee shop tomorrow morning.
I know.
I like those 2 picks. I can't argue either way.
Sure.
I think they both have phenomenal seasons. When you get between the 2 teams, 32-1 at this present time, and undefeated 9-0 in the league. You combine them, that's pretty impressive basketball getting done. So kudos to Coach Sonnenberg on the girls' side, Coach Heber on the guys' side. I think you got to look at some other teams, though. I really do. I love the Ottawa girls. We talked about them last week. They've basically almost have clinched the PCL. Undefeated in the league, 17-2 overall. Their 2 losses were to OG in a pretty close game in Minster way back early, and they're really, really good. And then finally, the third team I'd bring up on the girls' side is Anthony Wayne. how can you not throw them in there? They're 15-2, 5-0 in the Buckeye side of that NLL. Man, they've just had a great season, and they're right now followed though by Northview, and those two play coming up in a couple weeks. So that's the league title. The title isn't decided yet, so they still have a big contest ahead of them. But I could go with any one of those three. If you want to go PH girls, I don't have a problem with that.
Coach, you have a way. He's always had a way of softening me up, Lynn, because he's a very diplomatic fella, and those are all excellent.
Let's go with the PH girls. I'm okay with that.
Okay, I like that, and I'll tell you, because this is what I was going to say. I like the PH girls absolutely. PH boys, I'm going to say this. If they want to be the team of the week, then they've got to come into town and take care of business against Liberty Center Friday night. That might put them over the edge.
Okay, so you're not giving out PH boys just yet.
We're going to stick with PH girls. PH boys, they got to get over that hurdle for me to give them the final nod.
They got to beat the Tigers this week.
Well, we talked about last week. Somebody wasn't here last week, but we talked about that scenario for them. They had four league games remaining. 3 on the road, at Wauseon, at Liberty, and at Archbold the last week. And then Delta comes to town for the fourth game. So for them to win this league, they've got a tough road to hoe. With three big crucial league games, and they've got one down. So now they got to come Friday night to Liberty, as you mentioned.
Well, they had to do some work to get it done at Wauseon, didn't they?
Absolutely. They were able to get it done the second half. So that's a good team. There's no doubt about it. Again, I like watching them play. I think they've really got a good thing going. Let me just throw some other ones out. Last week we sat here and said, man, the game of the week, without question, if things go like it should, Saturday night in Delphus, you got two undefeated teams. That was an unbelievable game. Spencerville went to Delphus and ended up upsetting. I don't know if it's an upset or not, but they beat Delphus for their first loss. But lo and behold, on Friday night, Grove didn't uphold. Grove put a squat to that undefeated season that Spencerville had, and that's a team right now. Columbus Grove, when it comes summertime, there might be an even record right now in terms of their season to date. But that's the team I'm not real sure I want to see on my bracket. Mm-hmm. That's a team that's well tested and tough kids on that Grove team. So I'm going to throw both. I would have given it to probably Spencerville had they succeeded for the Friday night game, but that didn't happen. Liberty Benton, boy, they just keep winning. They've got that league pretty much wrapped up. They're 15-1. They got couple non-league games though that will determine their season. They've got to go both home games with Defiance and Patrick Henry yet to play, so that's interesting on their schedule. And then Perrysburg and Southview, both those teams in the Buckeye side of things. So, Cardinal, the Southview is the Cardinals side. But thanks, Coach, for coming.
Appreciate it, Coach. Thank you.
Safe travels, Coach. Grab a drink for the road if you'd like. All right. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, he's something, isn't he?
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
I lucked out. Oh. I resigned from Patrick Henry. We'll come back to the guys here in a second, fellas. I'm always around their program, summer camps and things. And I just said, hey, I'm available. I'd love to come over. I miss practice. I want to see how you guys do things. And if you want an extra pair of eyes in your practices, I'd love to volunteer, And they thought about it, and a year later they got back to me and said, we'd like to have you come along. And that was unbelievably for me, that was going to be that 09 season. So I did weasel in, and I'm proud of it. So that was, and I really did I always say back asswards, you should be doing this early in your career and then go out and take all the things that you learned and have your own program. But I did it on the tail end, and nobody had ever said I was very smart. So, but it was a great experience. The people that we met, I was there for 12 years, 3 under Coach Niekamp and 9 more under Coach Ernst. It was just phenomenal. So, kudos to that program. I think the world of that program. Back to the guys. Perrysburg on the Buckeye side of the NLL, Southview on the Cardinal side of the NLL, both solid teams. teams. And then finally, one team I think goes really unseen around here, forgotten about, is Otsego.
Yeah.
Otsego is 14-1, 9-0 in the Northern Border Conference. Now, they do play a round robin, so they're going to be playing. They got Genoa, who's their number one adversary right now, who could probably take the title from them. They get 2 more games with Genoa between now and the end of the season, so that might spell a lot of what happens for Steve Carroll's team. But they come to Saturday night to LC. LC's got a nice weekend.
Yeah, they do.
You know,
Yeah, they
how about
do.
that?
Yes.
And then finally, Lima Senior. I think if I was going to pinpoint a team that I think has had a great season, that's the Shawnee Indians. You know, Mark Triplett, he's done a well of a job down there. 14-2, undefeated in the WBL. A week ago on a Friday night, they took Defiance into overtime and won that game, which was at Defiance. Never an easy thing to do, and they put themselves in the driver's seat in the WBL. I think that win really kind of leads me to say let's go with the Shawnee Indians.
I like that.
I saw them play in the district last year against Napoleon, and I was blown away. Not only were they talented, but boy, they were well coached, as you said. So I second that, Coach.
Okay,
Yeah, perfect. Congratulations to Patrick
no
Henry girls.
fisticuffs. How about that?
No. Nice diplomatic approach by both of you there. I appreciate that. I didn't want to have to hold anybody back.
Absolutely.
We'll have Brandon Pardon here next week, former Lincoln View Star. Tuesday, right, Coach?
Tuesday.
Former Bowling Green Star as well.
Yep, Tuesday, and I had the time. I'm not going to dig for it, but
Yeah, well, they don't need the time. We'll get it uploaded at some point Tuesday evening.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome.
Yeah, we're getting close to tournament draws here. Can I just pick your brains real quick? I know you've been to some NLL games this season and some NWL, Coach Strock, and you've seen some action around the area. Girls and boys side, where are some teams that are going to make a run, do you feel like?
I think we've talked about it. Whether tonight we mentioned them or last week and prior, those teams that have been mentioned all along, they are in the run. Now, I love the Otterville team on the girls' side. Again, the twins, the Turbine twins, are really good players going to the University of Findlay. PH has a good draw. I mean, it's just a matter of the draw. I mean, it's you look at some divisions and some districts. Take a look down at I think it's Division 6 at Van Wert on the girls' side. Wayne Trace has a good chance of winning the GMC. They're probably the 4th best team in that particular district.
Wow.
I mean, in terms of the RPI. So, boy, there's some loaded districts, and then just like other years, there's some sectionals that maybe aren't as Leslie as, in terms of caliber of teams, supposedly, but, say somebody's going to get out of them. That's why I look at it. You look at those, each district across, I don't care what division you're looking at, 1 through 7, one of those teams is getting to a regional.
Yeah.
And that's pretty special time. Once you get 1 of 16, that's special.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, Coach covered a lot of ground there. Anthony Wayne, I'm curious, as talented as they are, can they take the final step and hoist the gold trophy in Division I? It is so hard to do. I look at, Napoleon. They're going to run into, I'll tell you who's really good, Bellevue and Shelby girls. They have a big matchup this week. I think Bellevue's like 17-1. Shelby may be just a game behind that, so that'll be a big game. But so I'll be excited to watch that.
I think our listeners should, if they're really into this and how it's going to shake out, and at least have a little bit of knowledge before the actual draw, be it Sunday for the girls and the following week for the guys, go on to the OHSA website and click under tournaments, and boys or girl, whichever you decide to look at. But they do have the up-to-date max prep RPI listed there by districts. So you can see who's in your district. If you're following a certain team, you can see who the district is, where your team today lines up with the other 7 or 8 teams in that particular district, who are your main foes and who are the favorites based on the RPI. And you can spend a little time going through that. I think that's something that basketball fans will be doing here a lot here in the next couple weeks.
A lot of uncertainty with the 7 divisions now, and we'll see where it goes here over the next few weeks as we get down to the state tournament.
For sure.
And all that good stuff. Here's your guest this week on 96.1 WMTR, Coach?
We always have a VIP segment. Okay, very important person, we call them. But we also can make it the VIP segment, which is a very interesting person. And tonight, the young lady that we brought in for that particular segment, she fits them both, and that's Ashley Oyer. Name ring a bell?
Wasion.
Yeah.
Well, what's unique about her?
She coaches boys.
Absolutely.
Used to coach girls.
She was a phenomenal player for Brad Myers' teams back in the 90s at Wasion, that unbelievable run. She went to Cleveland State, played for 4 years there, came back to Wasion, was in the girls' side at Fayette and Wasion, but now Chad recruited her and said, hey, why don't you come coach my JVs?
Yeah.
You don't see that too often around there. I mean, in our area, no, can't think of another one.
Nope.
Another female who's made that switch. A lot of guys doing both and whatever, but she was fun to talk to, and her journey is pretty interesting.
Yeah. When can folks listen to that again?
That'll be tomorrow. It'll be
Thursday
aired for the first time, and then Friday tomorrow 7 on WMTR 96.1, and then Friday on a replay at 5 o'clock.
Perfect.
I love it.
Yeah, great.
Yep,
Looking forward to next week and getting Brandon Pardon here. Thank
Yes,
you,
sir.
Coach Krauss, Coach Strock. Thank you guys so
Enjoyed
much.
it.
We'll be back next Tuesday with Mr. Pardon.
Yes.
Looking forward to that. It's going to be a great show. Have a great week, everybody.